Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, the Draft Lab proudly brings to you Lab Research, the Dominaria United edition. All right, since this is the first one we're putting on the MTGA Zone YouTube channel, you might be asking yourself what Draft Lab is. Oh, you didn't know? Well, we're simply the best draft team around. We've all been ranked number one Mythic multiple times. We've made a ton of Pro Tours. We drafted an absolutely absurd amount. And we're here to let you know everything you need to know about Dominaria United Draft. First up, what is your strategy going into each draft?
Just Dominaria United as a whole just really rewards you for being in the open lane for your seat. So jumping into any new draft, I try to take picks that keep me as open as possible. It's rarely a land pack one, pick one, because there's normally something more powerful to give you some direction. But I like to take flexible cards early over narrower cards that put you in a specific archetype. I like to take something that's good in every archetype.
Chris?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Icky just said. I think that, taking strong cards that are flexible and can be put into almost any type of deck is also really good, because usually you can get if it's like a single pip, good removal spell or good creature, you can usually find dual lands later on to kind of jam into almost any 2-color deck if you end up going that way anyway. So yeah, I'm all about just taking the strong cards out of the first several packs and not worrying too much about staying in the lane or solidifying my colors off the bat. Since there's so many dual lands, you can usually try to get into a splashing situation, even if it doesn't work out, more like the domain deck or like a streamlined 2-color deck. But I think you should prioritize power up front and then start focusing on synergy and splashing kind of fixing down the road.
Benji.
I would just like to totally agree with what Chris said about just taking the most powerful card out of the first few packs and stuff like that. When it comes to Dominaria for me, or Dominaria United for me, there are just so many good cards, so many possibilities, and there are enough lands and lands of every color that you can really put together like any deck that you can imagine. And so for me going in early, I just want to take the best cards out of the pack. And also, all the cards in Dominaria United have like a home somewhere. I've been doing some Mirrodin drafts, and not every card has a home somewhere. So you'll always have, 40 cards that go in some decks. So I don't mind taking some speculative picks that might be a little more specialized early on. And then if they end up in the board, that's fine. But I really like getting the powerful cards early and letting the table kind of dictate what colors I am. So yes, kind of staying open, finding the open lane as well. And that's kind of my early draft approach.
Yeah, I kind of agree with most of the stuff here. It's just the fail case in this format. It's not that bad. Like even if you just jam all the cards together, and that's why sometimes just the powerful card will you don't really need to consider archetypes early on, because even if you jam random archetypes together, it's still gonna work because the lands allow it and the power level of the cards is there.
All right, Eagle?
Nothing much to add. I was on mute. But yeah, in general, like everybody said, grabbing the strong cards, trying to find a lane, and I guess for me at least, archetypes in a way do matter, but for me, archetypes are either you're in a 2-color deck, soft splash, or you're going for 4+ color, 5 domain, and then you're just taking the key cards in those type of decks, whatever the key cards would be. I guess it depends on which 2 colors are your main in your multicolor deck.
Right. Well, what leads to you into jumping into a narrow aggressive deck instead of trying to stay open? Chris?
I think the difference between playing a 2-color streamlined deck and anything else is 2-drop quality. It's kind of hard to find good 2-drops in this set for certain colors, especially. And if you're gonna do the 2-color streamlined deck, you need to win with tempo or aggression. and like 2-drops are very important for those. There's very few decks you can make the argument that like blue black, like straight Demir, could go toe to toe in the late game with some decks, just with like terrors and kind of like control magic stuff. But I think for the vast majority of like other 2 decks, you're not going to be able to compete with like domain, 5-color, 4-color splashing stuff. So you need to end the game fast. So that means good 2-drops that focus on like tempo and aggression is key.
Icky?
Yeah, like to be a streamlined 2-color deck, you need a reason to be so. I think, like Chris said, you can't let the games go long. You need to have some really powerful synergies, or like a bomb that supports the overall game plan. Like a Squee or a King Darien, or some reason that you want to be a dedicated 2-color deck, because you need to tempo down. If the game goes too long, you're just gonna start drawing dead while your opponent, says on a domain deck. Once they turn the corner, the game's over. So to me, the reason to be there would be it's open, but B, you have the enablers and the tempo, like a Balmor, and the support to close the games out, at least somewhat early.
All right, Eagle?
For me, it feels like if I'm gonna end up in like 2-color deck, like first of all, like I didn't get like any key of the domain cards, and I'm not like going for the defender decks. And I guess like those 2 decks are maybe the boogeymans of the set. Like you want to be able on winning against the Chaplain decks that do go like wide with the birds, or the heavily value domain piles, let's call them like that. So like for me, if I'm ending up in the aggro deck, I'm either gonna try to be like an Izzet and try to like cheat in a way the great cards or like early pressure that it does build, like with terrors where they play it like for 2 mana, or I don't know, like the evasion that it does have with their uncommons and stuff like that. Or I'm going wide in a way that I'm trying to maximize the charge through effects, the +2/+1 to the whole team, in a way of like making a board that those decks are like kind of slow on dealing with, because like they are good on making the value, but sometimes they're like bad on like interacting with your stuff. So like I try to build the decks like around those edges, or like I guess if I'm making an aggro deck, which is like maybe not considered as a 2-color, but a domain like rule one, then I guess as early as I can put the pressure on and having the enough domain lands.
DeFore?
I think like in aggro in this side, it's really important to have a game plan how to break through the board stalls, because like you're not gonna get there just by curving out the creature like you maybe did in other sets. And the problem is, especially in like white aggro decks, that like something like take up the shield is a really good trick, but your creatures are small, so even like take up the shield won't deal with like, I don't know, a 5/5 or a 4/6. So you really need like either a lot of removal to keep the momentum going, or like a go white pump spell, or I don't know, something like, for instance, the black white legendary creature that you can just like swing all, and when creatures are dying, they're gonna lose life, right? Like you need something like that, otherwise you're not gonna be fat, because like eventually they start gaining life with repossessions. I don't know, like they just clog the board, and it's so almost impossible to then push the last damage through.
Yeah, and just like any aggressive like setup, you need a critical mass of 1-drops and 2-drops. The combat tricks in this set have really high ceilings, but they get significantly worse if you can't play them on curve when you kind of establish a board and they have to put something in front of your creatures while they're tapped out. So like if you just don't get critical mass of 1-drops and 2-drops, it makes a lot of the good combat trips a lot less worse, which makes the aggressive decks just worse in general.
Benji?
Yeah. So I think that when we start looking at the aggressive decks in Dominaria Unlimited or United, that one of the like pinnacles of the format is these like giant cost reduction commons, that any of the good decks are going to be kind of enabling these cost reduction commons that are like 4/6, 5/5, stuff like that. And so, like in in Kamigawa, it was like you had these sagas. They were like delayed, and a big thing was like getting under them. But with these giant creatures that are coming down early in this format being like a defining thing for the aggro decks, you either have to like go wide with heroic charge. If you're a white deck, like I really don't see any aggressive white decks that aren't like go wide. And if you want to attack aggressively in a blue deck, a big thing is having like Tolarian Geyser and Tempo and stuff like that, because you'll need to like be bouncing these large creatures, keeping them off the board while you're able to get some attacks in. So for me personally, I think it's a bit of a hostile environment to play an aggro deck in, and I have been like biasing towards the blue decks. And if they end up in an aggro shell, that's cool. That kind of comes to me. But the blue color also has a lot of flexibility to play like controlling long games. So those are kind of my thoughts on aggro in this format.
DeFore?
Yeah, one of the like hidden or not hidden, like it was a little bit hidden at the beginning, like the aggro deck is the Gruul trick deck, which is not really a 2-color deck, right? But it kind of goes better toe to toe with those big creatures, right? And it can just push like a lot of damage through with combat tricks, like I don't know, a combat trick plus twin cast, or what's the card, twin flyer, twin cast, Twin Inferno, or like just trample on, or you can just power up the monstrosities, the 5/5 that gets reduced by if you play like Gaia's Might on a creature, play the monstrosity after the combat. But it's hard to get into that deck because like the other domain decks also want the same cards, right? But like I don't know if you view this as a 2-color deck, because usually you're Gruul based, but then you can still splash some kicker costs and stuff like that, and you will have the lands to do that because you want the lands for domain anyhow.
A little out of order from what we were planning, but since we're on combat tricks, in my opinion, properly playing with and around combat tricks is the biggest available jump in in-game EV available in the format. How do you guys feel about this?
I think in this set, I'm just kind of the mind to get your opponent's combat tricks out of their hand as soon as possible. I don't know if that's the correct strategy, but that's like just what my instincts and gut tells me. If they're attacking with a smaller creature, they're 2-drop versus your 3-drop. I block, get the combat trick out, because typically the decks that are playing these combat tricks want to end the game early. And if you take all this incidental damage, then you get in a position where you're just going to lose to the inevitable combat trick they've had in their hand the whole time. So I mean, that's my just philosophy with it, is just always get it out of their hand as soon as possible, and then try to stabilize from there.
Yeah, like one of the things people don't think about is that you should be playing around these from the beginning of the game. Like, so if you're playing against a white deck, sometimes you just take like a suboptimal trade because you just don't want them to be as wide later on. But Benji, you had said you were bouncing up and down.
Yes, I think that it is very important in this format, and honestly in every limited format, to just kind of judge every situation. But when people kind of present to you that they might have a combat trick, a lot of times that's information that can really help you later in the game. If you have a deck with interaction, you can kind of frame that in a way that you can make your interaction get more value, or make them have to have a second answer. And if you are in a deck without interaction, you can also kind of use that knowledge to kind of like Icky was saying, maybe block early and force like a tempo advantage of them like tapping some mana on their third or fourth turn, kind of making them play off curve, and also getting that trick out when it'll be even more devastating later in the game if you're light on interaction.
Eagle?
Yeah. When it comes to like tricks in this set, I kind of found it like at the beginning hard to like realize which combo trick they can have, because like people are playing like 5 colors, and sometimes it's like hard to determine which trick are they representing. But I'm in the same school as Ike, is like try to like take it out from the hand, and then if they do have it, like they do have it. Or like if you can go for the other approach, which is like they represent the trick, but you have like a way of interacting around most, and then like setting up the situation where you can maybe blow them out. Because like combat tricks are a good use of an effect in combat where especially opponent is tapped, but like if you can play around it, then like it can be a thing you can use in your advantage for sure. So I guess the first thing about this set would be try to realize which is the trick they're representing, and then like see if you can like either play around it or be just like take it out from their hand, like because like if they're not gonna use it now, they're gonna use it 2 turns later, and you're in the same spot.
DeFore?
I would just like to add to this concept of like playing or how you play early in the game around tricks, and often like the playing around the trick is luring it out, because otherwise it will still get you later, right? But early in the game, it's a tempo advantage, so you have to it's not like people miss are weird on that, because like they will always play around, like not, let's say, not block if they represent the trick, right? But if you don't have a plan how to deal with a trick like later on or something, it's better to lure it out, because they cannot deploy another creature. You're gonna gain tempo there, right? And that's like a really like such an important concept in any set, not just in this one, but in this one also particular, because the tricks are so good at like dealing multiple like not so much damage to your face basically, and you're gonna prevent that like early on with like a random 2-drop or something.
Yeah, and there's so much reach in this format. Like between Colossal Growth, Lightning Strike, Outrider, you really do have to be careful about how much of that damage you take early on, too. Eagle?
Yeah, one more thing to add to the tempo thing is the thing that like it came out to me that it was actually a fine thing to do depending on which deck you're playing. But like there is a lot of ways you can actually take the tempo either way, like the four they described, like you make them use a combat trick, they're not deploying more, or either other cases where there are creatures that are like mana activation, like the Rutwala Tutu, sometimes blocking and like chum blocking and like putting your creature under the boss in a way there where they have to use the mana can be beneficial. So like there are those situations where you can actually gain some momentum even though you're losing a card. So it all depends on like what is your purpose of the deck. Are you gonna try to get to the late game and then like use your repossessions and 2-for-1 cards, and then like getting all the momentum you can be beneficial. So sometimes like that's a good way of like getting the tempo.
Chris?
Yeah, so two things on this whole concept. One, from like a set perspective. If you think of other sets, like recent past sets, like let's say Midnight Hunt, Crimson Vow, even like Zendikar Rising, there's always like things like in game that you had to kind of make micro decisions for, tapping the zombie, the various tappers in Midnight Hunt, when to sacrifice blood tokens in Vow, the dual lands in Zendikar Rising. There's not really anything like that in this set once you hit the game. A lot of that is like front loaded in the draft and the deck building side of things and like balancing your lands and stuff. So like this is kind of, like playing around what your opponent can have is kind of like the thing of this set that separates people who are like really good at the set versus aren't. And another thing is like it's very important to pay really close attention to your opponent's attacks and decisions for multiple turns, because usually if you string together like information from a few turns together, you can start to parse out, oh, they don't have the +3/+3 trick, but they have the Gaia's Might, because they would have attacked with the slightly smaller creature if it was +5/+5 if they had it, but they didn't. They only attacked with the bigger one. Or it's like, oh, is it Gaia's Might or Tail Swipe or Tail Whip, whatever it's called? You can usually figure that out. It's like, oh, that would have been a really good opportunity for them to kill my creature and just swing in, and they didn't with 1 green mana. So now I'm putting them on Might. So there's a lot of like, you have to kind of pay attention multiple turns to start to narrow down what kind of tricks your opponent has, and that will help you like really make better play decisions when it's your turn to act.
All right, so what picks are you prioritizing lands?
Might be the hardest question.
Definitely is.
Yeah, I mean, it's different for everyone, and I don't know if there's a right answer, but, that's the beauty of draft, right? Everyone's got a different approach, and you can't say anyone is wrong. And all of us have good results with different approaches. But, personally, I really, really like to draft as many lands as I can in pack one. And then pack 2 and 3, I should know what colors I can be, and I can build a deck from there and not worry as much about a mana base. And it allows me to kind of see what's going on at the table. I have the ability to splash whatever I want. I can get into a domain deck, or I can get into a 2-color focus deck, because arena drafters are very stubborn, and if white red's open pack one, white red will be open in the whole draft. You don't have to worry about, I'm passing so much white red to my left, it'll be there for the most part. But yeah, I mean, it's different for everyone. Some people like to pick all the best cards and then try to get the lands later. I like to get the lands first. it's a line you have to make for yourself whether I try to take this powerful card or the land, and I tend to be more on the land side of that spectrum, and stay more open in that regard.
Eagle?
Yeah, for me it was maybe like I guess one or two ways. First one is like it depends on the card I'm like gonna take over a land. Is it a good domain payoff, or is it just an overall good card? So like I usually, if I'm like ending up in domain decks 4+ colors, I usually want to grab all the good domain payoffs. I don't know, like in black green, the 4/4 uncommon for 6 mana. Like all of those cards are like way overpicked. At Tiova, like you all take all of those good cards that are gonna put you in the main decks over lands. But like overall, I guess like it all depends on like whether or not I'm like ending up in splashing a deck for just the kicking abilities, which I sometimes care less, or like I'm ending up in more colors. So um, I would say like as early as pack one, like pick three, pick four. Like if I know like where do I want to end up with my deck, those are the moments I can like start taking maybe the lands over some like overall weaker cards. Uh, but I guess like it is important on like realizing if you're gonna end up there or like you're gonna stay open more. Um, but I think like you don't want to end up in like having more than like 4, 5, 6 lands. So like it depends on like where you're gonna take them. And sometimes, like I said, if you're just splashing the cards and they don't care about domain, like there are a lot of ways of doing so. Like green has the 3 mana 1/1 that can give the mana. Blue has the 1/1 that can turn the land into any color. So it all depends on like which type of more than 2 color deck you're gonna end up.
The four?
Yeah, you definitely don't want to pass too much power for a land. Plus, like, at least like some direction where you want to go with the lands, right? Because you still want to have a base 2 color deck with splash everything, right? So you can go up to 5 colors, but like it's still like better to splash from like 2 colors, right? So your early drops are at least in your main. And also then it comes down like, for instance, the green lands are pretty safe to take, right? Because the green usually wants to splash, and so I would prioritize green lands early because you're more likely gonna play them than, for instance, like other colors. Yeah.
Chris?
That's a great point about the Greenlands, the four. I never really thought of it that way, but that makes a lot of sense.
I made
But
that point in the podcast this week.
one would have to listen to the podcast to know that. Anyway, what I wanted to say was I think pack 2 is like kind of the critical pack for where lands come into play in terms of like, you leave pack 1, maybe you have a dual land or two, but mostly speaking, you have like your initial kind of frame of where you think you're going. You have an idea of what might be open. You have an idea if you have a couple payoffs cards in your pile or if you're leaning towards an aggro deck. And so I think people sometimes make the mistake of assuming they'll get lands in pack 3 when they're heading down a domain path in pack 1, and you should not make that assumption. So I think you should really like evaluate your pile after pack 1 and be like, are lands going to be critical for my plan? If yes, then I start prioritizing them high. Other than because pack 2 is like really where you want to start picking things up if like having a lot of dual lands is on your radar or not. Because if you let pack 2 go and you don't have your land fixing and you have all these domain payoffs, your deck is going to underperform because without the domain payoffs, a lot of the domain cards are just lackluster. And also conversely, if you start picking lands too high and then you end up in a very like streamlined aggro deck going into pack 2, you've probably wasted some picks. You don't really want a bunch of tap lands in any aggro tempo-y deck, generally speaking.
Benji, you were bouncing something down a sec ago.
Oh yeah. So what DeFord said about kind of like prioritizing the Greenland really kind of struck a chord with me, and I believe that you and Joe John talked about that on the podcast as well. But for me, it's like these lands in this set, like they are powerful cards. Even if you're in a 2-color deck, like you're likely to have like Sunbathing Rootwalla, or like maybe you have like Urborg Repossession, or like a card that you can randomly kick, like an aggressive deck. So unlike Kaldheim, where like your dual lands were literally just coming in to play tap and helping fix, like these lands are powerful even in the 2-color decks. So when I'm looking at a pack, I factor in the fact that these lands are powerful. But I don't like to take them too highly because, kind of like before saying, like I will speculate on the green ones, but not all lands are created equally per se. Like if I'm in a black white deck, like I'm more into a land that could produce green mana to kick like the Urborg repossession and stuff like that. If I'm in a blue red deck, I'm very into like white mana for a Talarian Geyser kick or like some sort of minor splash, as opposed to like green for a joint exploration splash is not something I'm super interested in. So I just think that these lands are really powerful and they enable a lot of the flexibility in this set and a lot of the way that you can build like your own decks. Like I've lost to like blue, white, 5-color control and stuff because these lands just let you do anything and they make all your cards more powerful. And I think that you really have to look at them as like very powerful cards for your deck in this set. This set I've been playing a lot more 18 land decks than other decks because land types matter and stuff like that. And so I just think that these lands are great. But that being said, you do need spells to cast with them, so it's hard to take the lands over the powerful spells. And so I typically lean into spells early, but I love my lands.
Eagle?
So yeah, I definitely agree. Like in general, that maybe the pack two would be the best when it comes to like taking the lands. But the problem sometimes can happen when like everybody has that logic and everybody start taking the lands, and then like this set is like really difficult when it comes to like reading the signals and like how are you supposed to like approach the draft. I think like one of the things that you always gotta do is like adjust to the table you're setting, which is like a general thing. But like pay attention to like what was happening with the lands in pack one. Like were they willing? Like if they were willing, maybe you can like in pack two get a chance on maybe not taking them, and maybe it can happen again like in pack three where you're gonna actually have more chances on taking the lands. And in general, like I do agree that maybe the green lands would be the best, but like I guess it all depends on the context as well. Like if you're ending a base white, I think you don't really want to take much green because like red and black kickers are better. So I would say like in general, yes, green lands are the best to like take. But like if you're base white, like red, there is a lot of good red kickers, white red cards, and like white black as well. And one of the things that I was personally doing as well when you're ending up in a two-color deck is to like try to not take as much dual lands that are in your color, but rather take the lands that are not in your color. Because like sometimes you're gonna open a card that does have like white but has the black splash for the kick, which you can definitely play if you're base white. That's like a card with the upside. So in general, I would say if you're like ending up in a two-color deck, you don't need more than one dual land in your colors. Because like you're a two-color deck, your mana is a 10-9 or 10-8 is already fine on casting the spells, but rather maybe go for a speculation pick of not taking a second in color land, but taking a off color white red land just to have the charge being able as a kick, or the 2/2 flyer that has an amazing kick ability. So like don't focus that much on the lands, but like yet again keep that in mind. If you do need to take the lands, that there are the decks which are gonna take the lands as well. Like is gonna try to prioritize lands because like they don't want to play more than maybe 15, 16. So having a dual land is gonna make their mana base easier and so on. So like really difficult set, I would say, when it comes to like lands and reading the all the symbols.
Like the four fell asleep for a sec there.
I just want to add that I found myself playing 18 lands so many times, even in best one, just because you want the mana to be like 8/8 of your main color, right? Then you just add that extra land. It's better, I think, in this set than than having like a bad basically base mana. Yeah.
Yeah.
Icky?
I'll make it really quick. Yeah, just the another thing just to add to the complexity is just the land's taking up a common slot, and like you'll go through pack one and 4 picks and see 0 lands and be like, okay, what maybe I should be doing something else, and then you'll see pack one, pick 5, and there's 3 lands, and you're like, what the heck? That's just stuff that can happen. So uh, it makes it even trickier. Just to piggyback on what Eco was saying, it's a tricky format.
All right, that brings us to the important one. Is Wingmantle Chaplain as egregious as people are making out to be? Chris?
I have a lot of opinions on this, and I think it's one of those cards where you see it win, and it wins in such a like glorious fashion that you feel like the card is unfair. but I think it has a lot of weaknesses that people maybe don't pay attention to. And I think one of the biggest one that's like kind of underplayed is it's coming very early on in any match. Like as soon as an opponent plays a wall that's like not the vine wall that's finding cards like in the main deck, your like kind of radar should go up. And they also are going to be trying to play a few walls out before casting the card, or else it's kind of useless. So you can flip on the switch of like I need to beat a chaplain deck very early on in matchups. And sometimes your deck is just like not suited for it, but a lot of times you have some kind of decision making power to change your game plan or change how you play a little bit to get under a deck like that, or at least have a game plan for it. So like, holding on to your counter spells and making sure you don't play it until they play the chaplain, or using your combat tricks a little more aggressively to push damage so you can finish them out with like an outrider before they clog up the board. There's a lot of things you could do to kind of like counter this deck that takes several turns to like set up before it really pops off.
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to just how the content creation cycle works. That everybody saw this thing that was out, it was an outlier, and then everybody just freaked out and was like, and everybody jumped on it, and everybody made like whatever their new video or their new whatever about it, followed by everybody else being like, "This is the greatest card ever. It's the best uncommon it's ever been printed." And then the stats cause this huge problem because it's just like people who don't understand how stats work are just seeing these numbers and going, well, that's better than this. It's the best uncommon that's ever happened. OMGs. But they haven't actually played the games and been like, oh, or they haven't thought about all the times, this card's just sitting in somebody's sideboard. I wasted my pack one, pick one.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that card's not going into any deck where it's not good. That's the difference with this card versus many other cards.
Eagle?
Okay, yeah, definitely agree with everything you said. I think that card is a great builder on, like, it's a great archetype where you get it early, because like nobody, I think it's correct way, if you're ending up in Defenders, you're gonna end up because you have a chaplain, not because you have a Drain or Mill, which can happen. Like you can make a deck function, but it's not as close as good as with a deck that does have the chaplain. I think the deck is way better in best one than it is in best of three, like, because in best of three you know what's happening, and you can, I think, sideboard in a way that you can have a better matchup, either that being like you have two random cards that do say deal 1 damage to every creature, or you just have like maybe one more counter spell which you're gonna end up in putting in the sideboard, the three mana one, or like some other interaction, I don't know, discard spell, going wide, whatever. I think that when I was playing that deck, it struggled really much when it comes to like not hitting land drops and falling behind. So I think that would maybe be the weakness of the deck. So like I have seen, like I have been doing deck doctors and people are putting 16 lands in those type of decks. I think that's in general wrong. I think the deck is like really bad if you don't play the Sentinel like 10-4 and like don't put the pressure. And I think the deck can, like, even though somebody has it, it's still like totally winnable, because like sometimes 1/1 birds are not the best on the blocks and you can get them with a go wide strategy, charge, and so on. So like definitely a strong card, definitely a good archetype, but it's not the best, and it's not like a losable match when somebody does cast it.
Yeah, I want to be clear that it's a good card and it's a really strong build around early on. So I was kind of commenting on like more of the like, if you're facing it, don't be like panicked. But yeah, in the draft portion, if you open this pack one pick one, it does set you on a very nice path if walls is even like half open in your pod.
Yeah, I mean, you always pack one, pick one chaplain and hope to live the dream, but I think it was outlined pretty early by a lot of us. I know specifically myself, all the walls payoffs are uncommon, so there's a good chance you just don't see them because everyone else pack one, pick one's chaplain. You know, the only time you're typically getting a second chaplain is pack one, pick two if they picked a bomb, or sometime in pack three, likely. Uh, and yes, the other walls can win games, but they're not nearly as strong. So you just gotta hope to live the dream. It's an investment worth, or a risk or whatever you want to say, worth taking. You always take it because the end result of the walls deck is so powerful. But yeah, it's highly contested and it's not Fence Sentinel. I miss you, buddy.
Yeah, it's only 0.9 of each uncommon in a draft, so you're not likely to get multiples of it. And also, one thing that I brought up in the podcast that's pretty important is that Vine Wall has essentially been cannibalized by a bunch of other decks. So that's one of the better walls that you need for that deck. Like the week 1 piles that were absurd had a few, like 2 or 3 Vine Walls in there to make sure they hit their land drop and to give them another easy wall. And without those, it's a much more manageable thing, and the deck's kind of weak to stuff like Trample that's floating around. DeFore?
Yeah, personally, I just had like really bad results with like all-in Chaplains. Like I think it's first of all, like they're miserable to play, and the losses feel more frustrating because you're just slamming the walls, right? You're not really like doing any tricky stuff. You have to tap out each turn. That's how the deck operates. If it's an all-in wall deck, and like it's so hard sometimes to switch the pressure, especially when you're facing like a bigger creature that walls cannot block profitably. That's the problem. Then you have like all of the 4 drops, and you're only playing a 4 drop per turn. And if your birds don't get there, you basically have lost, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
the most success I had is like, I don't know, like some blue-black control just splashing like few sentinels and few other walls, because like blue-black has usually the best walls, and then having all the removal, also the mass removal and stuff, and just playing your control game plan. But then having this like go white plan with the walls or the birds or whatever, yeah.
And also,
Yeah.
like Chris was saying,
Go ahead.
how you always see it coming. You should know that the walls deck, that they're going to have it there. And then you just hold up Essence Scatter, because if they don't resolve Chaplain, they're still just playing a bunch of walls. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think the best like walls deck is essentially just splashing Chaplain. You know, blue black, kill spells, walls, some card advantage, Chaplain. And honestly, I think I've won more games in walls decks with the other walls, the Blight Pile and the Coral Colony, than Chaplains, because I think those shells are just way better, and that's often what I end up with, and then get like one Chaplain or something that gets dealt with, and then I end up draining or milling them because I'm addressing all the threats. So Chaplain, 100% overrated. I'm sure we all agree, but it is still good. And sometimes you get to live the dream and just get really lucky, but and get like 3, but it's not really going to happen very often at all.
I think Blight Pile is underrated, though, because getting that 3/3 out there early puts such a break on them beating you down. Then you just sit there and play control with that. Benji?
So I think Wingmantle Chaplain is an awesome card. I haven't won many games with the Blight Pile or the Coral Colony, but I haven't really played many wall decks since like the first couple weeks because it has seemed like really contested. The wall deck and Wingmantle Chaplain in particular, I've seen some people compare like that uncommon to Zenith Flare, and like I think it's it's an interesting comparison, but I don't think it's like necessarily correct, because like Zenith Flare, your enablers all say like 1 mana draw a card, and Wingmantle Chaplain, you play all these bad walls. And people will argue that, the Shield Wall Sentinel can find it. Sure, it's a 1/3 for 4 that tutors up the Chaplain. Whereas like the Cycling deck has all these 1 mana cards that are just digging you to the Zenith Flare, while like filtering through for other good cards in interaction. So I think that the Chaplain deck, it's definitely something that you need to be aware of. You should definitely recognize it early when your opponent is playing it. And it's something that you want to be aware of. Like if you open a Chaplain out of a bad pack, I mean, definitely speculate on it. Give it a go. But I had one pick in particular where like I took a Chaplain. This was like week 1 or so, and I was like deep in the wall hype. I took it over a Cruelty of Gix, and I like regretted it immediately when like the wall deck just wasn't open. And so I kind of like made a mental note to myself, like I'm taking like powerful rares and like good cards over the Chaplain, like because it seems like it doesn't always hit even when you get it. But when it does hit, as I think it was Chris was saying, the results are like insane. Like you have like 30 tokens, you're just completely overwhelming people, and like it can feel like you can never win. And that's totally true. But I think it's definitely just more of a niche deck, kind of like Demir and Strixhaven and stuff, where like you definitely want to know it exists. You want to know how to play with and against it, and that will help your win rate. But I mean, I see myself probably drafting a wall deck like 1 out of every 12 drafts at this point or something, like not super common by any means.
Yeah. All right. So, what are the differences between best of 3 and best of 1 in Dominaria United?
I don't think I've actually played much best of 1 at all. So I'm really enjoying best of 3. But yeah, aside from playing some best of 1 like day 1 with Icky, I don't think I've jammed much best of 1. So just want to get that one out of the way.
Icky?
I played a good amount of both, but definitely favoring best of 3 in this set is really, really good. I think it's a good best of 3 set. And there's also a lot of really good sideboard cards that really can wreck a lot of things, especially like things like Smash to Dust and Choking Miasma, and there's just and like Broken Wings is a very relevant card out of your sideboard, and also no mana or Hand Smoother makes the games feel a lot better because Best of 1 is a little annoying. Playing against or with 5-color decks and with Hand Smoother, just they never stumble. It really incentivizes you to just abuse your mana base, and I'm not a huge fan of that. But I don't have much to say in terms of like what decks are better or worse. But I just would like to say that I think best of 3 in this set is a much more enjoyable experience for me personally, but probably for most.
Yeah, and on the sideboard cards, it's not just the obvious ones. Like, think about a card like Joda's Codex. Like, how good is that card in any control mirror? It's just a game breaker. But if you play that against a white aggressive deck, you just scooped up your cards, right? You just lost because they heroic charged. Chris?
Yeah, I like both of your points a lot. I kind of want to build on what Icky was saying. I think I haven't played too much best of 3, but I think to comment on like a specific deck that gets hurt in best of 1 over best of 3 is Rakdos, and the reason why is like the sideboard options in black and red, particular. Icky called out to a red and a black card in a Smash to Dust and Miasma, which I thought was kind of funny because I had this point ready to go. But like the flexibility in those colors from the sideboard could really like transform a deck from aggressive to control and everything in between. And so I think we see like a low instance of Rakdos in best of 1 because you don't have that flexibility, which I think is one of its strengths. Whereas like in best of 3, Rakdos feels very strong because you can do the like steal and sack combos if they're just a big creature deck, or you can add a bunch of the I forget the black domain, like draw card spells and, Smash to Dust to just completely like dunk on the Walls deck or Miasma. There's a lot of options in that color pair specifically that get a lot better when you know what your opponent's doing versus just out of the gate. And so I think that's a big difference is like, I think some decks suffer in best of 1 from not being quite on the same playing field. Whereas in best of 3, I think it really does, like every deck is, has its strengths and weaknesses, and you can kind of draft every deck in best of 3.
Eagle?
So yeah, I mean, I agree with everything. I'm not gonna like add much to it, but I think that this set was maybe the best design. I mean, like, of course, like when I'm comparing best 1 to best of 3, I like the best of 3 more, which is logical. For me personally, like when I'm playing best of 1, it feels like I'm either having a 7-0 deck, 7-1, 7-2, or I'm having a deck that seems good, which would go decently in best of 3, but it goes 1-2, 1-3, or like 0-3 or whatever. For me personally, it just feels like this set was maybe the best design for playing in pot. Since I think that would balance the set because like not everybody could play a 4 or plus 5 color domain. Everybody should like realize what is the best on their seat, but unfortunately we don't have that on Arena. But like in general, I like the best of 3 more. I think it rewards better players, and um, it feels rewarding having like some cards which are not gonna end up in your main deck, being able to like sideboard in and making the match better in your favor in this set.
Chris?
Yeah, and one thing about best of three or best of one, since we're talking about how complicated the draft portion is of the set, it even like cranks that up a little bit more, because then you have to have one other decision in your kind of like hierarchy or prioritization when picking cards, because it's not just lands over cards, it's also like sideboard cards too. And so it does like even increase the difficulty even more in the draft portion of best of three, which I think, for us as the draft lab, I think we kind of like the challenge, but that's something to keep in mind. Is like this is not a draft set for the faint of heart, and then you jump into the best of three, it's going to be even more kind of like tough decisions.
Yeah, with the 5-color tendency of some of the decks in this format, it will inherently raise the variance a little bit. So I would rather play best of 3 where the solid plays can play out better instead of somebody with a really greedy mana base taking advantage of the best of one hand smoother. Benji?
Yes, I just wanted to kind of step back to like the best of 3 and the sideboarding note. I really enjoy, crafting the deck against the opponent, like in the control mirror, like someone had said, like the Jodas Codex. And another thing in a control mirror, when card advantage is key and like divinations are, better than they've ever been since original Dominaria or something. But you can actually take the draw sometimes, and you can board in a bunch of mind drops, like aggressive sabotage, I think it's called, and you can kind of win a card advantage game that way. In game 2 and 3 against a control mirror, I would never recommend that in best of 1 going in blind, but it's certainly just another way to attack because card advantage seems great in this format, and some of these mirrors will go forever.
Yeah, I think in Sealed, there's definitely matchups where you want to draw first in this format. Eagle?
Yeah, one thing to add to the Mind Rot to this set. I think the Mind Rot in this set is a bit better than it was in past because it has the Blightning ability where it can deal the damage to the opponent. So I had a deck which was like a Sussex. Maybe I'm biased towards it, but I had a deck that did have like double Twin Inferno and it had like 3 Mind Rot effects and like a lot of good removals, a lot of good finishing cards. So it feels like this set has like maybe that archetype that has to be explored as well, but I would say that how the games are going and that how the tendency of the matches are that most of like you're gonna play against the value deck, that the Mind Rot is maybe a bit better in this set than it was in past. Like worst case, like top decking it, it's a 3 damage to the face. And like Ragdos wants to like deal the damage. So it's a bit better.
Iki?
Just I like the Mind Rot in this set, but yeah, like everyone said, best of 3. But best of 3 on the draw, as long as your opponent's not an aggressive deck. I'm almost always putting in the Mind Rot, and it's normally very good.
All right. That brings us to our last question. How would you summarize the format as a whole? Chris?
Yeah, I think I see this format. I kind of like have a visual for it. And it's kind of like a graph in terms of greed and power level. And like, you kind of want to keep on like pushing your deck in terms of getting more power, getting more like, I can play this like off color kicker and stuff. But there's kind of a carrying capacity or a breaking point where there's like a sharp drop off if you go a little too far. So it's really about like trying to hit that peak of like power and then getting the most out of your deck. But it's very easy to put a couple too many like kicker or off color cards in your deck, or maybe too many tap lands, and then your deck just like crash and burns because you can't actually do anything. So that's kind of like the whole format to me, is like maximizing the greed, like balancing, trying to get as much power of your deck without like going a little too far before it blows up all in your face.
Okay, DeFore?
Yeah, I just don't like the format at all. I think it's like one of my, like, if not the worst or like the second worst format in in Arena actually. And the main reason is there's so many non-games you play in this format. Like, I mean, maybe I'm playing too much best of one also, like, because then the sideboard decision and stuff like that add on, right? But in a lot of the decks in a lot of the matchups, you have decisions, right? But they don't result to a different outcome of the match, and that feels frustrating a little bit. Like you're working towards like some advantage, and then like a single card like Repossession completely takes that away, or like, I don't know, like Repossession into like then Chaplain or whatever. There are just like so many cards that just swing like this like who wins or loses like in such a fast manner. basically. And the other thing is, what I wanted to say is, I kind of lost a little bit of a train thought there, but yeah. But just this frustration is kind of like really awkward for me.
Eagle?
Definitely felt the same as the four, in a way that there were a lot of non-matches where like I couldn't do anything about it, or like opponent is like killing a natural Tron lands in a way that they have all 5 colors turn 3 in, and like that's like seems like a really low chance that it can happen, but like that's magic. It can happen. But one of the benefits of this set that I kind of see is like learning experience in a way that like at the beginning of the set I had to adjust in a way that, because I was always trying to like end up in 2 color decks, staying disciplined, is to try to stay open to like ending up in splashing or ending up on like more than 2 color decks and like trying something new. I think that this format does reward people being experiment in a way of like trying to get out of their comfort zone and uh, going for the unusual strategies, because like in this set you can splash everything, there is a lot of lands if you do take them, and a lot of strategies can be open. But I found that like really interesting about this set, where I didn't know what I was doing and I was trying to adjust to it, and it was like kind of cool learning experience.
Benji?
Yeah, I totally agree with what Ekel had said towards the end there, and like unlike Defor and Ekel, I really like this format. I feel like it's kind of like magical Christmas Kickerland, where like anything is possible, and it's got like I don't know, the off-color kickers remind me of like Apocalypse and Plane Shift and stuff like that, and all these old Magic sets, and like card advantage being good, and like mind rots being more relevant. Just everything about it really like hits on some big time nostalgia for me, which I wasn't expecting going into the set because I didn't really like original Dominaria. But this nostalgia for me is more from like the game design of like some of the older sets. Like I remember the first time I played a Pixie Illusionist on turn 1, and I set an upkeep stop for my opponent before I realized I couldn't tap their or make their lands a different color. Sadly, but yeah, I love this set. I love that you can really just kind of brew and like almost anything in your imagination is possible. So this has been way more fun for me than Streets of New Capenna, way more fun than either form of the Baldur's Gate, really since Neon Dynasty, which is another one of my favorite sets ever. I think this set's great personally.
Iki?
Yeah, I'm Team Benji. I think this is one of the best sets in a very long time, or a great one for me personally. The hints of nostalgia are great. I was also a big IPA fan, both versions. But I think DeFore is playing too much best of one. I think you're really just playing too much best of one. Give best of 3 a chance, because it is really fun. And it really rewards like just good gameplay. You're saying that the decisions don't matter as much in best of 1. They feel like, to me, they do in best of 3. But it's also, I think the gameplay is good, but I think what's even better is the drafting portion and the deck building portion are like very complex. The gameplay is good. I wouldn't say it's overly complex or anything. It's solid, and I like that. But I think it's one of the deepest draft formats I've played in a very long time, and deck building is right alongside that as well. So it really rewards people for knowing their stuff.
All right. DeFore?
Yeah, it just comes to, I guess, like this personal preference, because like for instance, Benji mentioned that he doesn't like Kamigawa as well, Neon Dynasty. He likes it, but I don't. Like, I just don't like the sets where you can just like draft random stuff. You get away with drafting random stuff and then get the lands randomly and can just make a pile and still gonna win. I think like the best sets for me are the ones that don't have enough playables, where you're gonna get really punished by not reading signals, right? Where you're gonna have to play like a 3-mana 2/3, and that's bad for you, right? you wanna be in the like in a position where you read the signals, and then you get like good deck because you did that, like you did that well and you drafted well, right?
All right. Eagle, you were.
No, pass.
Oh,
Wow. Okay.
Everyone
Chris?
said.
yeah. Yeah, I wonder like how this is just totally like almost non sequitur, but I wonder how it would change if like best of 1 drafts only had like 12 cards in the pack. If we like shaved a couple of cards off where you can't just start speccing on things as much because you start running against actually running not having enough playables. like I wonder how that would go towards like making decks be a little less powerful on average and making people be a little more proactive in like choosing a lane. Because I kind of agree with what DeFore is saying. One of my gripes with this format is like there's almost too much fixing. It's too common. They didn't put a cap on the dual lands, and it just feels like people can jam literally everything into their deck with little consequence a lot of the times. And I do like sets where the fixing is a little more hard to come by, and then like people have to make decisions a bit more in terms of like balancing pick A versus pick B, or whatever, fixing versus good cards, as opposed to just getting to live the dream with everything. So like I wonder, it's just like I'm still waiting for the set where they find the fixing balance to be like just perfect. And I feel like this is getting closer, but it's a little on the like over the top end for me.
All right, Benji.
Just a quick hot take. If we're talking about going down to 12 cards and stuff and decisions mattering, what if we lowered the pick timer to like half of what it is and just really get these drafts moving?
I think that's unfair to people who don't play as much.
Okay.
I think it's unfair to people who don't just like look at a pack and be like, oh, I know everything about the set. I know all these cards. I can make my decision fast.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was just my idea.
All right. I think that's going to wrap it up for us. Thanks for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe below, and come check out some of our other content at mtgazone.com.